Hello, and welcome to Storytime with HDTHUL. I am HDTHUL, and I'm going to read to you one of my books, Henderson's Meat Wagon. Anyways, I had to delete one of my videos because I made a mistake. Anyways, apologize for the inconvenience and everything, but uh, I have to redo chapter 1, so rather than doing two separate videos, I'm just going to try to do this with one. So try to bear with me, folks. Anyways, if you like what I'm reading, click like and subscribe. And also, remember I have 3 other books out there on Amazon under HDTHUL. Last name spelled THUL. So, anyways, I'm going to try to do this again, try to read this whole chapter in one setting, so bear with me. Chapter 1, Leonard Henderson. Chapter 1, page 1. Leonard Henderson had shackles on his feet and hands as he was being led to the golden courtroom where there were angels on each side of the transparent gold street that they were walking on. They were making a path for Leonard to be tried before all of heaven. He had just died on earth and was being led to the great golden courtroom, and Yahweh was waiting patiently for Leonard to appear before him. They walked up to the golden double doors, and an angel that was leading Leonard knocked on the doors 3 times. The doors opened, seemingly by themselves, and God was sitting behind the judge's bench, waiting for them to enter. There was a rumbling as Yahweh spoke. "Leonard Henderson, come forward." The 2 angels that escorted Leonard this far had let him go so he could walk up before the Lord on his own down the long and narrow aisle between the angels leading to the judge's bench. He walked down the seemingly eternal aisle, with many other angels that were standing by their benches on both sides of him, as his eyes were solely on the judge, on Yahweh. An angel sat before the judge's bench and spoke in a loud voice for all to hear. "Court is now in session. The honorable judge and our Lord, Yahweh, is presiding. Please bow before the Lord, the most fair judge who is standing before us." Immediately, all who were in the courtroom bowed before the Lord, especially Leonard Henderson. As Yahweh began to sit down, everybody else began to sit down as well, after just recently bowing before him. Yahweh looked down at the long scroll which was among a few others that were on his desk. Then he looked up and said in a low rumble after clearing his throat, "Leonard Henderson, come forward." Shakingly, Leonard came forward before God alone. He stood before him, looking up at the great and almighty God and Judge. Then Yahweh spoke. "My son, Leonard, you are being accused of, let's see here." He was straightening up the scroll from the many scrolls that was on his judge's bench. Finally, he found the correct scroll and then continued with, yes, here it is. You are being accused of murder, rape, incest, blasphemy. My. Anyway, it looks like you broke every one of my 10 commandments as well as your earthly laws as well. How do you plead?" "Innocent, my God, my Lord, Your Honor." "Are you sure you want to plead innocent?" "Well, if I didn't do it, then I'm innocent." "Yes, but in a minute I am going to expose your life before the court and all of heaven. How are you going to plead innocent when I have all the evidence in front of us, right here?" "Your Honor, if it may please the court, I believe that I may have had probable cause for my behavior. I think that after you do see the evidence that may seemingly convict me, you may be convinced that it is not entirely my fault. I believe that after you watch my life, you may actually sympathize with me and make me the exception to your self-righteous rule. You may even see me as a loyal servant to you. You see, I have no tolerance for hypocrisy, or lying, or deceiving in any way. My family contributed to my behavior as well, as you will see. I had the world on my shoulders, and you are accusing me of breaking all of your commandments? What do you expect me to do when I was standing alone? Where were you, Lord, when I needed you? I feel that it should be you on trial and not me. I think I actually did you a favor killing those fake so-called Christians and ridding the world of unfairness and killing those that pretend to follow you. At least I wasn't pretending. Just then Yahweh turned around, and then a screen appeared in front of him, and in the screen was showing Leonard's life. Tabitha Henderson had suffered a miscarriage just a few months ago, and she had never gotten over it. As a matter of fact, she had gotten much worse. It was late fall, 1975. She was already insane when she was pregnant, and even before that. But this seemed to be the icebreaker. Her miscarriage had set her over the edge. What's worse is that she had dreamed of having a daughter. She yearned so long for a girl. She has her 2 boys, and they are good to her. But she desired a girl, and the baby that was stillborn was in fact a girl. She couldn't accept the fact that maybe she just isn't meant to have a girl. Why, God? Why? She would say as she would look up with her hands in a giving gesture. And then the tears would come. After that, the screaming, which was so unbearable that when she is like this, nobody could stand being in the house with her. Christopher Henderson was an 18-year-old retarded boy, and Leonard Henderson was 16, and they were getting ready for school. It always seemed that Leonard had to always be responsible for his retarded brother. It just doesn't seem to be enough that Leonard has to babysit his retarded older brother. Now he has to endure the ridicule from other classmates because Tabitha has to put a dress on him and makeup on his face and make him go out looking like a fag. Get over here, Lenny, Tabitha was calling out. No, Mama, no. Please don't make me go to school like this. Don't be such a baby. Mama just wants her little girl to look her best. The bus will be coming soon. Come on, Mama. He was trying to shake off the barrette that his mother was forcefully putting in his hair. Meanwhile, Daniel Henderson, Leonard's dad, was standing in the corner of the kitchen watching as his son was getting humiliated. Tabitha was slipping a pink dress over Leonard's head when it was completely on. She stepped back and looked at him and said, "There, that's my little girl." Leonard sulkily walked past Daniel, and Daniel stopped him with his club of a hand and then gave him a bag of clothes and said, "Here, put this on as soon as you can." Leonard gladly took the bag of clothes and said thanks. Then he went to Chris's room to help Chris get ready for school, and Chris was on the floor playing with matchbox cars and making little car sounds as he was playing with them. "Come on, Chris. How come you weren't ready yet?" Leonard scolded. Chris looked up to see his brother is wearing a pink dress, so he started to laugh and point at him as he would say, "Lenny's a little girl." "Shut up," Leonard was scolding him. "As soon as we are out of this house, I am taking the stupid dress off, so shut up." "Okay, Lenny." "Do you have all your books, Chris?" "Right here." "Okay, let's go then. I want to make sure I have enough time to get out of this dress before the bus comes." They both walked down the stairs. Lenny had his pack and his bag of clothes. They made it to the front door and walked down the sidewalk, and as soon as there was a bush that was visible, Leonard rushed over to the bush to change his clothes. "Chris, stand there and watch for me, okay?" "Okay, Lenny." He stood there like an English guard, watching to make sure that his younger brother isn't getting humiliated. Leonard practically ripped off his dress from behind the bush as Chris was trying to warn Leonard. "Lenny!" "What, Chris?" "The bus is coming." Leonard was putting on his shirt as the bus was approaching and walking towards the bus stop with Chris and his pink dress in a bag. As the bus was approaching, there was a shout from a student on the bus. "Hey, retard! You shut the fuck up, you piece of shit!" Leonard shouted back. "Oh, look! The fag is protecting the moron." Then everybody on the bus laughed. Leonard looked down and noticed that he still had makeup on and the barrette was still in his hair. So his face dropped as he and Chris walked onto the bus. As they were walking on the bus, the kids on the bus wouldn't let them sit down. So Chris and Lenny ended up standing in the middle aisle, and the bus driver looked in his rearview mirror and noticed that they were standing in the middle and scolded them, saying, "Hey, you two, you better find a seat. I can't have you falling and hurting yourselves." As the bus was full of kids, there didn't seem to be any seats available. So rather than standing in the middle, they sat down on the floor as the other kids were throwing paper and spit wads at them and laughing at them. All the while, Leonard is soaking all this in as the anger starts to grow like the heat from a furnace, as the thermostat seemed to be set at the highest mark, causing the heat from the furnace to intensify. Though not saying a word, but a single tear slid down his nose and into the corner of his mouth as he tasted the saltiness of his tears, with his retarded brother sitting in front of him in the middle aisle, being bombarded with spit wads and crumpled up paper balls, as they would say things like, "Duh, my name is Christopher, and this is my gay brother Lola." Or they would chant, "The faggot and the retard, living like a sack of lard, sucking each other's cocks and calling it a blowhard," over and over, all the while fueling anger in Leonard's soul like a raging inferno. Finally, the bus stopped at the Humboldt High School grounds, and everybody got up and got out of the bus. The teens all piled out of the bus, with all of the other kids getting out of the other buses. The crowd of kids entered the brick school building as the bell began to ring. Inside the school, the hallways were full of teens and preteens going to their lockers and going to their classes. The kids that passed by would either spit on them or slap Chris and Leonard in the back of their heads and laugh at them as they would walk past. Leonard had to be strong for both of them, though. Actually, he had to be strong for his mother, too, when he got home as well. And he had to be strong because of his high-tempered father, who, when angry, gets very violent. Chris and Leonard parted ways when they got into the high school building, as one way is to the special ed department, and the other way is to the high school. But before that, Chris gave Leonard a hug and told him that he loved him. Then Leonard told him to go along and hurry to his class before he is late, and that he would see him later, as Leonard shrugged it off and went to his first class. Leonard's first class was woodshop. Everyone in the class was sitting by long metal tables, and the shop area was open, as the large area was speckled with electric saws, planes, and other woodshop equipment. Danny Lawson was one of the kids that on the bus that were hazing Chris and Leonard on the bus. He wore a black leather jacket, a white t-shirt, a pair of blue jeans, and a brown leather boots, and he had a shifty smile. He was leaning up against the wall and waiting for the bell to ring to begin the class. Tony Grisham, Billy Tyndale, Benny Threshgood were leaning against the wall with him. Soon the bell rang, and Mr. Gary Olson told the class to open their textbooks to page 35. Then he glanced over to where Danny Lawson and the other three troublemakers were leaning against the wall, and he said to them, "Find a seat, gentlemen." Casually, they strolled over to the tables and sat down right next to Leonard, making him feel uneasy as they were all smiling at him with a smile that he just did not trust. "Hey, princess," Danny told Leonard and winked. Leonard just looked straight forward and attempted to ignore him. Then he tapped the back of Leonard's head forcefully, causing Leonard's head to bob forward just a bit, and then he said, "Hey!" "I said, 'Hey, princess.'" "Yeah, I heard you." Mr. Olson, who was trying to teach the class, glanced over and said, "Danny." "Yes, sir," he said kind of mockingly as he straightened himself up briskly. "Save your conversation for later. I am trying to teach the class." "Yes, sir." Then Danny glanced over at Leonard and said softly, "Okay, pretty boy, we'll continue this later." "Okay, princess." He nudged him hard enough to push him over just a little bit. Mr. Olson said sternly, "Danny." "Yes, sir." He turned around briskly, mockingly saluted him, and his three friends were laughing. "One more time and you will be in detention." "Aye, aye, Captain." Mr. Olson put his attention once again to the class and began teaching. When he was done with the lesson, he told the class to follow him to the shop area so they can start making their projects. You could hear loud buzzing of electric motors coming off of the bandsaws and table saws and planes. Everyone was giving safety glasses before coming into the shop area. The students made their way over to the pile of wood and each grabbed a plank to begin with and started to make their projects, in which the project was a miniature grandfather clock. The project was for the final grade for the quarter. So this project weighed heavy on their grade, which was important for Leonard because if he comes home with one more failing grade, Daniel Henderson would give him a beating that he would never forget. Danny Lawson was watching Leonard closely with squinty eyes from the table saws that he was standing by. Leonard walked past him, and both locked eyes with each other for a brief second, and Danny went back to splitting his plank. Leonard took a 6.5-foot plank from the pile of wood and took it over to the large blue plane. All the wood had gotten stripped from the old gym, so there was at least half an inch of varnish that had to be sanded off before they could begin their projects, as there was a line of students holding their wood planks, waiting for their turn at the gigantic blue plane. There was a setting on the side of the plane to set the height. There was 10 feet wide conveyor belt and a sander above the conveyor belt that would draw the wood through the gigantic plane. There was also a large green button to turn it on and a large red button to turn it off. There was also a large duct coming from the top of the sander to take out the sawdust. It was finally Leonard's turn to sand down his plank. He laid the wood plank on the platform that the conveyor belt wrapped around and set the height for the plane, turned it on, and let the board go through the plane, buzzing off all that varnish. He had to sand the board about 2 or 3 times before all the varnish was finally off. And he took the sanded board to the table saw, and he watched Danny from the corner of his eye the whole time that he was walking from the plane to the table saw. Then Leonard saw an opportunity. The thought of cutting Danny up in little tiny pieces was flooding in his mind as Danny Lawson was using a pencil to mark his measurements on the wood plank that he was working on. Butterflies were in Leonard's stomach, and his palms began to sweat as his nerves were taking over. I gotta do this right. Can't mess this up. If I do, then it will be me with a missing limb or dead. Leonard was thinking as Danny was obviously getting ready to turn his saw on. He looked around the area to see if Mr. Olson was watching. How is he going to do this without getting caught? He was thinking, as anger was taking over his fragile little mind. Finally, he had his chance. Mr. Olson had just left the room to work on some paperwork. Danny was pretty focused on his work, as everyone else seemed to be as well. It's now or never, Lenny was thinking. He took a deep breath, turned his saw off, and walked over to where Danny was working. Maybe he could make it look like an accident. He casually walked past Danny and quickly glanced to see if anyone was watching first, and then he pushed him forward into the bandsaw that he is now working on. It was so quick, you could almost say that it was instantaneous. He thrusted his hand through the bandsaw, cutting it almost in half. Blood sprayed from the saw blade onto his face, speckling his face with blood. He screamed. He screamed so loud that everybody turned their machines off and looked into his direction. Mr. Olson came charging from his office, and then horror filled his heart as he saw Danny with his hand dangling from his wrist. As he saw his hand dangling from his wrist, and blood squirting all over the machine floor, walls, and Danny himself. Danny was screaming, and his face was getting pale. Mr. Olson rushed over to give Danny first aid from the pool of blood that surrounded them, and and immediately grabbed a bandage, wrapped to tie a tourniquet and stop the bleeding, as blood was squirting from his wrist at an astonishing rate. After he finally got the bleeding under control, he asked, "What the hell happened here?" Nobody said a word. Then he asked again, "What the hell happened here?" Anyone want to explain this to me?" Then shakily, Danny pointed at Leonard, who was standing by his machine. "Okay, Leonard, explain to me what just happened." "I walked by Danny, and I tripped. When I tripped, I must have pushed Danny by accident." "He's a liar! He pushed me on purpose!" Danny said as loud as he could, which sounded more like a whisper, which probably would have been, "He's a liar! He pushed me on purpose!" And even though the machines were off, and there was still the noise from the ventilation system, and nobody seemed to hear him. "Danny, accidents do happen. That's why I stress so much for you all to keep this floor clean." Then Danny had a furious look on his face as he was watching Leonard seem to get away with this so-called accident. Immediately afterwards, he rushed over to his office and called the ER. And about 15 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, and the medical team came with a stretcher, sat the stretcher on the ground next to Danny, and slid him on the stretcher and put him in the back of the ambulance, with about 2 EMTs sitting next to him, keeping him alive and well on the way to the hospital. After Danny had left the ambulance, Mr. Olson told the rest of the class to continue with what they were doing, as he and Eric Mays barricaded the saw and surrounding areas, as the two cleaned up the blood from the area after shutting the power off from the saw. Through the morning, Leonard went from class to class, going through the crowded hallways to each class. Then the lunch bell rang. The hallways were getting noisy with students making their way to the cafeteria. That's when Tony Grisham, Billy Tyndale, and Benny Threshgood met up with Leonard. Leonard had a tray of food in front of him as he was walking over to his table to sit down and eat. Tony stuck out his foot and Leonard tripped and fell forward, spilling all his food on the cafeteria floor. Everybody was laughing at Leonard, and his face was buried inside a bowl of vanilla pudding. Leonard was completely humiliated now. His face turned both red with anger and with embarrassment. Chris was sitting in the same cafeteria, but sitting at a secluded table in the corner of the cafeteria, with a teacher supervising the small special educational department, which was just a handful of students with special disabilities. Chris stood up to see what was going on close to the front of the cafeteria. He was trying to see above everybody's head, as everybody seemed to be congregated in one area to watch the special occurrence, which was Leonard Henderson. "Sit down, Chris," Mrs. Rankin said, trying to maintain order with the table that she was responsible for. "I think that's my brother, Mrs. Rankin. If it is, somebody is most likely taking care of the matter." "Mrs. Rankin, that is my brother. I have to help him." "Sorry, Mrs. Rankin." "Sit down, Chris." Chris didn't pay attention to her at all. Rather, his full attention was on his brother, who was getting humiliated, and all he knew is that he did not like this at all. Chris got up from the table and went over to the area that Leonard was trying to get up from. People were adding to the humiliation by throwing some of their food at him. Leonard was getting showered with food coming from every direction. Chris broke through the lynch mob and yelled, "Stop messing with my brother!" Everybody stopped momentarily as the big retard came and picked up his brother from the mess he was in and helped him out of there. Chris turned to look at his brother, who was covered with green beans, fruit cocktail, and vanilla pudding. His hair was matted with all the food and drippings that were coming off of him as he stood up to walk with his loving brother. "You can sit with me, Lenny." Embarrassed and totally humiliated, but trying to gain his composure, but still trying to be grateful, but all he could think about was the humiliation. "Get away," Leonard snapped as he was shaking off his brother's loving gesture. "Okay," Chris said as he was slowly walking back to his special ed table with Kathy Reinhold, Bobby Gurul, Thomas Brown, and Randy Gunner. On the bus ride home, Leonard waited for Chris by his classroom. The teacher had just finished her lesson with the class as they were doing the work in a paperback workbook which consisted of crossword puzzles and coloring projects. Leonard peeked into the classroom and to find a handful of students busy coloring their workbooks, all with their heads down and focused on their work. Leonard found this to be kind of cute as he cracked a smile, watching his oversized ape of a brother sitting at a desk and coloring so intently. He waited by the door until the bell rang and the handful of special ed students lined up by the door while the teacher counted each one and then told them to be careful and that she loved each and every one of them as she kissed each one on the cheek. When she got to Chris, she kissed him on the cheek and she giggled when she noticed that he was blushing. "Oh, Miss Beverly, I told you not to say my first name while we were together in public. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, Miss Beverly Rankin." "I look forward to seeing you too, Christopher Henderson." Beverly Rankin was a very attractive 35-year-old woman. She had firm and perky breasts that would watch you if you were not paying attention. She was slim and had a big caboose. Her and Christopher had been sneaking around in the storage room to fuck on the account that he pleasured her greatly. Her marriage was on the brink and to be quite frank, she was getting bored with her husband. He never seemed to hold a conversation, as all he could ever talk about was his prize hogs and how he got his picture on the front page of the Humboldt Times for having his stupid prize hog with the blue ribbon. Whoopee. The first time was a little awkward, since Chris had never been with a woman before. It was while she had the other students busy coloring and doing crafts. She put Mark York in charge of the class while she has a private conversation with her prize student, Christopher. Mark, who was subbing for Mr. Robert Kuhn, the math teacher, but he had come back from his doctor's visit because the doctor had stayed home sick, so the rest of the day was free for him, and Mark gladly filled in for her since he doesn't get paid if he does not teach. Mrs. Rankin told Chris to come with her. She has been examining his package for quite some time now, and she was tired of fighting the urge. Chris followed her into an empty storage room in the basement of the high school. She closed the door behind them and locked it. Then she looked at Chris and said, "Do you know why I brought you down here, Chris?" "No, I can't say I do, Miss Beverly." "You can call me Beverly when we are alone, but when we are in public, you have to call me Mrs. Rankin, okay?" "Okay. I brought you in here because you are special." "I know, Mrs. Beverly. That's why I am in the special class." "No, Chris, I am attracted to you." "Are you attracted to me?" "Oh, yeah, Miss Beverly. You're pretty." "Good. I want to show you how attracted I am to you." "You are?" "Yeah." She started to unbutton his pants. He gasped as he pushed her away and said, "No, Miss Beverly, we are not supposed to do that." "It's okay, Chris. That's why we are in this room and the door is locked." "Oh, okay, Miss Beverly. Is this right then?" "Oh, yes. This is so right, Chris. Now just relax, and Miss Beverly will do the rest, okay?" She unzipped his pants, and he gasped again as she put her finger next to her mouth as she said, "Shh. Relax, Chris." Chris took a deep breath and let the air out slowly, and suddenly gasped again as he felt her lips around his penis. "Let me warm you up first, Chris." He began to moan as she was sucking on his cock. Her hands were on his ass as she was bobbing up and down on his shaft. His eyes began to roll back into the back of his head, feeling pleasurable. Suddenly, he looked down and her panties were coming off. She slipped them off of her feet, and then she said, "Okay, Chris, now I want you to put that in me." She was pointing to her wet and dripping vagina. As she was breathing heavy, without thinking, he put it in her, and she gasped, as his penis was just as big as she imagined. He was grunting and moaning while pumping his manhood in her sweet pink vagina. She moaned with pleasure, arched her back, and climaxing as he let out a sharp yelp, shooting his man juice inside her. "Oh, Chris, that felt so good." He was still breathing heavy with semen still dripping from his penis. "Did you enjoy that, Chris?" He was nodding his head, saying, "Uh-huh." "This is our little secret, Chris. Can you keep a secret? Uh-huh. He was pulling his pants up, and she was helping him get dressed. I'll take care of you, Chris. Okay. Chris came out of the classroom smiling with a touch of blushing on his cheeks. Leonard smiled when he saw how happy Chris was and said, "You look happy today, Chris." "Uh-huh." There was a brief moment of silence as they were walking to the bus, and Chris said, "I like Miss Beverly. She's nice." "That's good. You like your teacher. That's nice, Chris." "Yeah." They got to the bus together and sat down in the same seat together, with Chris looking out the window gleaming as he was thinking about Beverly Rankin. By the time the bus stopped at their bus stop, they were the only ones on the bus as they were the last ones to be dropped off. Quickly, Leonard went to the bush that he left his dress hidden neatly under the bush and changed into the pink dress that his mother had given him to wear. He folded his clothes neatly and put them in the bag that his father gave him, and then picked up the bag while carrying his books, and Leonard and Chris walked up to the front door of their house and went in. Their mother was in her bathrobe and smoking a cigarette. Tabitha was slowly strolling through the house with her cigarette in her mouth and a new issue of the Humboldt Times, with a picture of Dylan Rankin standing next to his prize hog at the state fair. He had a cheesy smile on his face, and his pig was monstrously huge, with mud on shit on his snout, and the date in the corner of the newspaper read Monday, September 25th, 1975. Tabitha turned to look at her two sons coming in through the foyer. "Why do you have a dress on, Leonard?" "Well, you gave it to me to wear, remember?" "You fucking faggot! Why do you put the blame on me?" she shouted. "You did have him wear it, Mama," Chris responded. "Oh, my baby." Tabitha started to cry. "I'm sorry. You're right. What's wrong with me?" "Nothing, Mama. There's nothing wrong with you. You're still grieving over your dead daughter." "My dead daughter!" she snapped back. "Don't you ever say that she is dead. She is not dead." "Yes, she is, and you will have to let her go." Slap! "No!" There was a red mark on the side of Leonard's face, and a sting to go along with it. He was rubbing the side of his face, and he narrowed his eyes at his mother, and he let his hand down from his face. Angered, but holding back because this woman is his mother. And no matter how frustrated she makes him, he still finds love in his heart for her. He shook off the sting and said, "Come on, Chris. We got to get ready for work. You know how Dad gets if we are late for work." "Yeah, I know." They both walked upstairs to change into their meat-cutting frocks, and then they went back downstairs and through the living room, and they cut around the corner in the kitchen, and then there was a door at the end of the kitchen. They opened the door, and now they are in the grocery store, which is attached to the house, as a processing plant is attached to both the grocery store and the house on the street corner. They came in the back of the store where the loading dock was and walked through the open area between the cargo area and the main store. The light from the store flashed bright as they walked through the open doorway. Then they turned to the left and met Danny by the windows of the meat department of the Henderson's market. And that's the end of chapter 1. That's page 18. So, anyways, if you like what I read to you, click like, subscribe, and also I have 3 other books on Amazon. Check them out as well under HDTHUL. Thank you very much, and have a good day.